Hello and welcome to Scientifically Speaking about the small scroll. This today is this was the first ever thing I drew where I tried to work out how an electric atom would move an electron from orbit 1 to orbit 2 or orbit 2 to orbit 1. So I started with hydrogen because it has one proton and one electron. I drew 4 pictures which are relatively the same. Orbit 2 fixed, orbit 1 fixed, nucleus proton, and it poofs from orbit 2 using the classical quantum leap, i.e. teleportation, to orbit 1. So orbit 2 to orbit 1. Or it could be going from orbit 1 to orbit 2. But again here, orbit 2 fixed, orbit 1 fixed, nucleus proton. Scientific answers to this, why? Don't know. How? Change of state, why? Don't know. Okay, so I then decided to do an electric atom. And we have input current on all, because all atoms are electrical, and they give off an electromagnetic waveform, which is why you can see them. So we have the same thing, nucleus, proton, orbit voltage 2, and orbit voltage 1. Instead of just orbit 2 fixed and orbit 1 fixed, we now have orbit voltage on both 1 and 2. Same thing over here, so it says poof from orbit 2 to orbit 1, or as I say, it could go from orbit 1 to orbit 2, which is how I've normally spoken of it. But what's my explanation? So for an electric atom, an electron orbit waveform migration of energy. And that's because it formed a vortex to get from orbit 1 to orbit 2. This would be the 2 lines I imagined that came out one side here, and then they cross here to form the next circle. This is where there is a pinch point of matter, is right where they meet and cross over. The matter is moved from here, and it is also pulled from here to form the electron here. So what have I put for the explanation of why this happens? There is a drop in current, or an increase. There is a collapse of the electron orbit. How? The proton is a regulating transform with 2 voltage switches. It reacts to current input. And the change of state is caused by the input reduction or increase. If anybody can give me a better explanation for the nonsense of classical orbit migration, go right ahead. But the wave migration is a vortex to a rollover halo wave. But there is a Z pinch. Sorry, that's the word, not an X pinch. A Z pinch, the same way you get planetary and sun formation within a Z pinch. So the actual circle that should just be here underneath, it's the crossover point from left to right. This is where matter is moved from both sides and then expressed as light. And as you can notice, I didn't draw it on here. I said there was a large circle and a small circle, which turned out to be phi to pi. Yeah, and if you notice, I didn't draw it because I imagined it. And I imagined it right here, and it lifted off and went into my forehead. Thanks very much. My name is Lee, and I contain the small scroll, and I follow the Christ. Thanks a lot. Bye.